Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we have a little bit of a special review. This will be my Hogmanay 2022-2023 review, or in other words, my New Year's Eve review. But yeah, 2022 was an awesome year for the channel. We got to do lots of different things, and it's strange to think as well that we are moving into the 10th anniversary year of the channel. So 2023 will bring many interesting things, I have to say, and I will keep you up to date with what's going to happen. We're going to do a little channel message video very shortly, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But from the bottom of my heart, a huge thank you to all of you who've supported the channel over 2022 and further back than that. It's always great to have you guys commenting on the videos, sorting out some beers for me. You know, it's been an awesome year, so a big thank you from the bottom of my heart to you guys that support the channel. You guys are awesome, and I wish you all a very happy new year with lots of prosperous times and lots of happiness. But yeah, since for me, at least, Hogmanay is a very Scottish holiday, I thought it was very appropriate to celebrate it with a Scottish beer and to sign off from 2022 with this. So yeah, thankfully we managed to get a hold of one. I think this should be very interesting. It comes from a brewery that are very highly rated, best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. But the beer we're going to look at today is a style that I haven't tried from them before, and one that I have been quite interested to try from them, I have to say. So it's nice to pop the cherry on this beer, I have to say. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are going to go back to the motherland of Scotland. We're going to go to Glasgow as well, and we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Overtone Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Theory of Everything. It comes in at 9% ABV, and they're describing this one as a pastry sour. But I guess at this alcohol content, we have to call it an Imperial pastry sour. But this one contains peaches, bananas, raspberries, blackberries, coffee, maple syrup, vanilla, and vegan marshmallows. Hence the name Theory of Everything. But this one just kind of caught my eye because of the name, you know, the reference to the Stephen Hawking film, and my background as a chemist and astrophysicist. So yeah, I think this should be a really nice one to sign off with from 2022. And it's also my very first sour beer that I'm trying from Overtone as well. So yeah, let's crack on with this and see what we have. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Overtone Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar and put your hometown, county, state, whatever you want into there, and if I've reviewed beers from your local area, pardon me, they should pop up. Otherwise, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist, along with many other things. So yeah, let's crack on then and chat a little bit about Overtone Brewing Company. So, as I've mentioned to you already, Overtone Brewing Company are based in Glasgow, Scotland's largest city, in the kind of southwest, I guess we could say. And the company was founded back in 2017 by Bo Wang, who is originally from Beijing in China. So, he had been a home brewer for a number of years before he founded the company, and the name Overtone comes from his love of techno music. And this is why you also get these kind of interesting patterns on the front of the cans as well. But Bo hired Dan Miller, who's from New Hampshire in the US, in New England, to come in as his head brewer. He had previously worked as a head chef, but also as a brewer in England, New York, and also in Scotland for 6 Degrees North, who are a very good Belgian-style brewery that I recommend you check out. But also involved at the brewery is Martin Conahan, who worked in the craft beer scene in New Zealand for a number of years. He takes part in the brewing, but also does a lot of other things on the business side of the company as well. And these days, Charlie is involved in the brewing side of things too, and he comes from a background as a home brewer and previously worked for one of the other local Glasgow breweries. But the brewery itself can be found in the New Albion Industrial Estate in Yoker, near Renfrew and Clydebank, and they began operations there in the middle of 2018, if I remember correctly. But these guys over the years have become very well known for their different kinds of New England hazy IPAs. They've been constantly expanding the brewery to kind of meet the demand for their beers, which has been a really interesting thing for them. But they don't actually have a fixed range, and they're always developing different beers. As of December 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 115 different kinds of beer, and they are producing a lot more sour beers and imperial stouts and things like this at the moment as well, which is of course very, very interesting. And I'm sure we'll see more different kinds of beer from them across 2023 as well. But as I say, very well regarded Scottish brewery these days. For me, these guys in Tempest are doing some really good beers when it comes to the more modern styles, and there are of course some of the really good traditional breweries in Scotland as well that need checked out. But yeah, Overtone are probably one of the best known Scottish breweries these days, and if you haven't tried some of their stuff, I highly recommend that you do. But yeah, the first brewery in Scotland that were founded on the idea of doing the New England hazy IPAs, and they've done very well off the back of that, I have to say, and quite rightly so. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Overtone Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery websites, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. And yeah, they will no doubt have more to add to that over the next wee while. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. I'm very, very curious about this one, my very first sour beer from Overtone Brewing Company. But once again, you've got this lovely techno artwork on the front of it. I know my friend Peter from The Clueless Drinker, he really enjoys trying all these different Overtone beers, and he really enjoys the artwork as well. But yeah, you can see lovely kind of plain silver top on this one, and yeah, it just goes together really well. But it tells you a little bit about the beer on the back here as well. Quite honestly, we've put everything into this sour: peaches, bananas, raspberries, blackberries, coffee, maple syrup, vanilla and vegan marshmallows, a mouthful and a half. This one is hopped with Columbus, which is an American hop we know very well, about 12 to 14% alpha acid. It gives you that big floral spiciness. But yeah, 440 milliliter can, this one. It looks absolutely great, and I'm sure it will be very nice. There's been some really interesting sours from Overtone that I've missed. You know, Sour Plume is one that I do want to try. But yeah, these guys, as I say, one of the most highly regarded Scottish breweries at the moment. But let's get this beer out into the glass and see what it's all about. The Overtone Brewing Company theory of everything. So yeah, this should be pretty cool. Very curious to see what this one's going to look like as well, I have to say. So yeah, I have to say straight away, nowhere near as dark as I thought it was going to be. But that doesn't matter so much, I have to say. The question is, it doesn't matter how the beer looks, it's whether it tastes nice or not. So I think we've got about 80% of the beer out and into the glass with this one. And I will say you can feel the weight in this thing. This is pretty damn dense. But before it disappears, we can say that the head on this beer is about 2/3 of a finger, frothy, and I would say it's not far off perfect white, but I do think it has a little bit of a kind of creamy coloured tinge to it. You can see lots of kind of medium-sized bubbles on the bottom there, and a few small ones pushing up toward the top of the head there. But you can see in the middle it has faded away to be a nice thin foamy layer, and it's got a thicker ring just around the edge of the glass. But one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. But incidentally, the head has just faded away to be a very thin foamy layer, which I do quite like. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, this is quite interesting, because I actually would have expected this beer to be a good bit darker than it is on the basis of the presence of the blackberries, because usually blackberries and blueberries and stuff give you a much darker appearance. But I guess if they're only a small part of the beer, it would kind of make sense. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, I don't even know if we shine the light through this. It's actually a very kind of like rich sort of peachy colour, which is kind of interesting. It has got a good little bit of haze to it as well. It's not the it's not madly soupy and gloopy. Does it say on the can? This one contains oats, but it doesn't contain wheat. So yeah, to tell you about that, the colour of your beer depends usually on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, these of course play a role when it comes to these more modern fruity sour beers actually. So yeah, the way this beer appears is most likely due to the different adjuncts and things that it has in it. Probably most likely the fruits. I don't know how much the coffee beans would affect it. The maple syrup might give it a little bit of its brown colour. And I think the blackberries and the raspberries I think will play the biggest role in determining the colour of this beer from that fruity perspective. But yeah, the haze in this one will be due to the oats and also the yeasty character. So yeah, quite an interesting one this when we look at it, I have to say. But not too much in the way of visible carbonation, a few little bubbles going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks quite nice, but definitely not as dark, and I thought it was going to be more red in terms of its colour. So this should be quite an interesting one to try, I have to say. It's already surprised me with its appearance. So yeah, I think we can have a wee look at the aroma and see what this beer is actually going to have in store for us. Let's do that. Oh yeah, that's really interesting. You can straight away with this one. It gives you this lovely smooth coffee backbone to it, and this for me this is a little bit nostalgic because of the first beer that I ever tried from Overtone. I'm pretty sure it was called Rwandan Coffee. It was simply called Rwandan Coffee IPA, and it was absolutely beautiful. I loved it. Coffee IPAs are a very kind of underappreciated style, I have to say, but they if they're done right, they can be very, very nice. That was my first experience with Overtone Brewing Company, so wee bit of nostalgia in there. They've re-released that beer under a different name, I think maybe Rwandan Press or something like that. But anyway, you get the coffee. This beer has a lovely smooth coffee backbone. And as I've said to you in many reviews before, for me, coffee beans are potentially my favourite adjunct that you can put into craft beer, you know. There is diverse as hops. It's all about where in the world they're grown, because you've got different water profiles, different malt profiles, different water profiles, different soil profiles, I should say. But it's also about the mazel, the meters above sea level. That plays a big role. So South American, Colombian coffee, for example, will taste very different from Ethiopian or Rwandan or something like that. But just going from the aroma of this, I do wonder if it is Rwandan coffee that's been used in this, because it just, there's something that just sets off my contextual memory with this beer. But yeah, the aroma in this one is really, really nice. But straight away, a lovely smooth coffee notes in this one. The coffee beans themselves, they've got a little bit of aromaticity to them, but a very smooth, slightly earthy roast. And there's just a wee bit of aromaticity to it as well. But yeah, the coffee bean for me certainly forms one of the backbones of this beer. But on top of that, you can smell a lovely kind of smooth breadiness to the beer, and also a bit of the oaty creaminess too. But then you've got a little, there is a little bit of an almost kind of brown wholemeal bready character in the middle of the nose, which is quite interesting. So yeah, bread crust, white bread, and then, you know, a bit of oaty creaminess to it, but the coffee beans really sit there at the back of the nose and form the backbone of the beer, actually. I think that's fair to say. So yeah, the way the aroma goes together in this beer really is very, very interesting. Yeah, I love that. I have to say, I do love how the aroma of this beer goes together. This one, as we say, contains a bit of Columbus. So when it comes to the green component in this beer, you are actually getting a fair little bit of this one. And there is a bit of a debate when it comes to these more modern sour beers. You know, do you add hops or don't you? Because if you do, it gives the beer a little bit more depth. But at the same time, if you do, you take away a little bit from the kind of sourness of the beer itself. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in some ways. Some breweries, quite a few of the ones here in Sweden who do these modern, fruity, juicy, smoothie, pastry, whatever you call them, sour beers, they don't add hops into beers. But I've noticed that when it comes to sour beers in Scotland, they do tend to add the hops. So it maybe just depends on the kind of brewing mentality of the country, or indeed the individual brewers in a sense. But yeah, with this beer, you definitely get a little bit of that distinctive earthiness from the Columbus. You've also got a little bit of a kind of spicy floral character to this one, and quite a bit of grassy zestiness. And in fairness, I would say that actually balances the coffee and the aroma out quite well. But one thing I do have to say about this beer is that the kind of fruitiness of it is not the most pungent, actually, which is, for me, is really quite interesting. This beer is not the most pungent and fruity of things. But it might well just be because of the powerful nature of the coffee and potentially also due to the green component as well. So that's worth thinking about. But yeah, aroma wise, on the fruity side of things, you can definitely smell a little bit of the banana and the sharper peach. The banana sort of forms the backbone of this one in that sense, but you've also got a bit of the peachy sharpness in there and the kind of peachy oiliness. And the thing is, I think this one, as you say, it has black currants and raspberries too. I definitely get some of the juiciness of the black currants, but I'm not getting the sharpness that you normally get from Scottish raspberries. So that's quite interesting. I've got a feeling that that might be something that shows up a little bit more in the actual flavour of the beer, but definitely a wee bit of the banana, some of the kind of more oily peach, and the black currants. So that's really, that really is quite interesting. There's quite a wee bit of the maple syrup comes out of this beer, as well. Like there's quite a nice wee maple syrupy note, in the middle of the nose of this palate too. You get the more that I smell of it, that's taking a wee bit of time to come out. So the maple syrup and the coffee are actually interacting together in a really interesting way in this one. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is quite different to the Swedish sour beers that I've had in recent times. But like I say, this is the very first time I'm trying a sour beer from Overtone. So different breweries often have different styles. So we just need to take this one as it comes and see what it's all about. But yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty damn interesting, I have to say. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we had a taste of this one to see what it's all about. One thing I've just noticed in the can that I didn't get too much in the way of the vanilla or the marshmallow in this. I think that really does take a back seat just because of how pungent the coffee is in this one, but we'll need to see from the flavour. So yeah, let's get the rest of this beer into the glass and see what we have. So yeah guys, this is The Theory of Everything, a 9% pastry sour with peaches, bananas, raspberries, blackberries. I think I've said black currants a few times in this video, so I do apologise for that. Coffee, maple syrup, vanilla, and vegan marshmallows. So yeah, that's kind of interesting, as I say. Has a little bit of everything in it, hence the name. So yeah, a very happy new year to all of you guys watching the channel, and a big thank you for your support over the course of 2022. Here's to a happy 2023. Slàinte, skål, cheers. I have to say, it's quite interesting. For me, just on the first taste of this one, I'm going to say this isn't a beer that immediately strikes you as, oh, this is amazing. It's not a beer that does that. It's one that I think does take a little bit of time for your palate to kind of adjust to and show you what it wants to. It's an interesting beer, and it is a good beer, I will say that, but it's not one that it strikes you immediately. You think, oh, this is amazing, you know? It's not like that. And the other thing for me is, I'm really not a massive fan of pastry sours either, or pastry stouts. I don't know why. It's just the kind of granola-y type flavours you get from these beers has never really sat well with me. I'd rather have like a smoothie sour or an old school woody Belgian type sour. That's just me. Or a lambic, something like that. And on the stout side of things, I'd rather have like an Imperial milk stout or an old school RIS or an Imperial coffee stout. I don't know. That's just me. That is just me. Some people love these kind of modern pastry stouts and sours and stuff like that. But this beer, I have to say, does keep my interest. That's the interesting thing. You do get a little bit of the kind of pastry sour vibe out of this, but it does well. It does its job well. So yeah, this is really quite interesting in that sense. Yeah, I like, you know, we're 3,600 reviews in on the channel, and you want beers that are going to test your palate, and this one certainly does that. This beer really does. It does test your palate in a lot of ways. So I have to say, I do appreciate that with this one, definitely. Um, yeah. The question is, where do we start with this? So, middle third of your palate then. Let's just focus on that. We need to take another sip of this because there's a lot going on in this one. So, the middle third of your palate, you've got a really nice kind of, you've got a little bit of a kind of bread crusty backbone to this one. Absolutely. So you can feel that in the base of the beer. There's a little bit of woody, you know, on top of that, you've got this kind of smooth, like, woody, crackery layer as well. And then you've got a bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready note. But within the kind of brown bready character, you start to get some of the more roasty elements of the coffee bean coming out of the beer. So yeah, bread crust, sort of Jacob's cream cracker, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, a bit more of a kind of woody character. Then you get this wholemeal brown bready layer which has the kind of coffee notes in it. And the coffee notes for me are very smooth, but they're also really kind of bright. So you get a little bit of a smooth roast to it, but it's got a wee touch of earthiness. Yeah, so lovely little bit of earthiness and smoothness and stuff in the beer as well. But then on top of that, you start to get, there's more coffee in that border region between middle and back third of the palate, but we'll come to that in a minute. But on top of that, as I say, you've got this really nice kind of smooth it's a sort of more white bready character. Yeah, on top of the brown homey bread, you do get a little bit of white bready character in there. Then you've got some nice oaty notes coming out of it. So you can feel in the middle of your palate, you've got a little bit of that oaty creaminess there, and on top of that, there's a more. You definitely get a wee bit of the kind of maple syrupy character to this one. It's almost a bit like a honeycomb flavour. So on top of the oats have a little bit of this kind of porridgey character to them rather than being very sort of smooth and dense as you can sometimes get. So you've got this wee bit of oaty porridgey character, some kind of as I say, a little touch of a kind of, definitely a wee touch of that maple syrupy note in there sitting on top of it, and it's kind of got a little bit of honeycomb flavour to it as well. And toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you can pick up a little bit of the almost marshmallowy note in this one. The marshmallow, I would say though, is quite hard to detect, but the middle third of your palate in this beer is really quite interesting and quite different to what we've had before, for sure. And that's kind of what I expected from this beer with all the stuff that's in it. It's really quite a quirky beer, for sure. One thing I'll say as well is that it's 9%, so it's a bit of a monster, but it's still, it covers its alcohol pretty well actually. You can feel a little bit of warmth in the chest down here, but yeah, it does actually cover its alcohol pretty damn well in that sense, so that's impressive, but also a bit dangerous. Yeah, so on the I think that covers the middle third of the palate. So let's go on to the back third of your palate. But the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready. Yeah, you do get a nice little bit of that bready build-up in there, but you also get the coffee bean. And as I said, the coffee bean has this smooth, earthy roast to it, but there's also a little bit of aromaticity there as well. yeah, it does have a nice, it does have a nice little bit of aromaticity to it, this one, which is good. So yeah, you get a good bit of aromaticity. I also get just a little touch of like red fruit or something from the coffee bean as well. But like I say, you get that bready build up in that border region between middle and back third of your palate, and yeah, everything else kind of builds up from there. So yeah, on top of that, on the back third of your palate, then you've got a few other things going on. You can feel that the bread crusty layer is definitely a bit more kind of grainy and dry, and as I've always said, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, you've definitely got that there, a more kind of dry, bitter and roasty, a very kind of dry, bitter and roasty bread crusty sort of thing. On top of that, you've got more of a kind of, you do get the kind of crackery and woody notes again, but once again they're a little bit drier on that back third of the palate. Then you get a wholemeal brown bready layer, which is a bit more tall and a bit more airy. Then you've got the white bread above that, and you can feel that the kind of coffee bean dryness creeps over the top of that white bready character as well, and you do get a little bit more aromaticity and dryness out of this beer. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really nice. So, on top of all of that, there's maybe another very light, airy, bready character to this one, like yeah, just a very airy, brown bready sort of thing. Yeah. So that's really interesting. It's really interesting from that perspective with this beer for me, just to see how that pieces together. But yeah, the way it works is the way that works is really quite interesting. And you just get this airy wholemeal brown bready honeycomb type vibe to the beer. So yeah, that's worth paying attention to as well. On the whole, you can definitely say that the flavours on the back third of your palate are taller, but then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, they just squash down and condense together a wee bit more, which is also really quite nice. Yeah, I like how the malty and adjuncty side of this beer goes together. As I say, the marshmallows are a little bit hard to get, but the honey, the I was going to say the honeycomb, the sort of maple syrup is definitely there, and the coffee bean is quite prominent too. So really interesting blend of things going on, definitely. On the on the hoppy side of things, then back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you get a little touch of herbal character as well. But as you move further forward into toward the front corners of your palate, you definitely get some of that kind of spicy floral aromatic note that you would expect of Columbus. Very popular early edition hop when it comes to West Coast IPAs back in the old days, for sure. But yeah, the way that that comes together is quite nice, and it also provides the kind of spicy floral bitterness you get provides a good balance with the it provides a good balance with the kind of roasty toasty coffee side of the beer. So yeah, that's interesting as well. So on the around the front curve of the palate though, you definitely get a little bit of a more kind of zesty grassiness, which again you would expect from Columbus. But then you also have the fruity notes playing a role in this one. Remember, whenever you add fruits into beer as an adjunct, it always takes away a little bit from the kind of hoppy bitterness of the beer, and you can feel that going on in this one. But let's focus on the front third of your palate and the fruity adjuncts that are in this beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of you do get a nice little bit of bready build up in there, which is nice. A little bit of bread crust. You can feel a little bit of the coffee in there as well, and maybe a little touch of the marshmallow. But the base of that front third of your palate is more smooth and woody. You've got a little bit of the bread crust as well, and the fruits sit on top of that. So for me, at the back of that front third of your palate, you definitely get a little bit of, you get the banana for sure. But the banana flavour in this one is very subtle. I hate bananas. I really do not like to eat bananas or anything like that. Other fruits I can deal with, but I've never liked bananas. The flavour of banana, like when I've had banana flavour essence in bread, that's fine, but I just don't actually like eating bananas. I think it's a texture thing. I just, do not like it. But anyway, so you get this banana-y type flavour at the back of that front third of your palate, and you also get a little bit of this kind of like oily pear and sultana like flavour as well. There's a few other wee things going on too. So yeah, there's a few other wee things going on there with this beer. And it gives you, on top of that, I don't get so much of the peach in this beer. Maybe further into the aftertaste, you get a wee bit of that sharper peachy flavour, like right in the middle of the front third of your palate. But as you move further forward, it's more about, you can feel the blackberries in the base, and maybe just a little touch of the raspberry, but the raspberry for me is very subtle as well, and it's probably just because of everything else that's going on in the beer. Like, you do get a little bit of that sharper raspberry on the kind of front tip of your tongue, but the blackberry underneath kind of makes it more juicy. And as I say, you've got a bit of peach in the middle, then you've got the banana and kind of apricot-y sort of flavours underneath it. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense is really quite interesting. So yeah, fruity side of the beer for me is interesting for sure. But you can feel around the front edges of your palate, as I was saying, the fruits always kind of suppress a little bit of the green component of the beer. You can feel the blackberries and the red, the raspberries. So I was going to say red currants there. Blackberries and raspberries really just pushing away at that and making it a little bit more. Just giving you that, like, suppressing the green component a little bit. So that's really interesting, I have to say that. So yeah, the way the beer goes together in that regard for me is really quite nice. So yeah, it's a really interesting beer, this one. I have to say, it's interesting to try something like this to test your palate. And yeah, it covers its alcohol very well as well. I think we've said everything we really need to about the flavour in this beer, but Overtone are very good at merging. I have to say that with them, they are very good at merging coffee into beer. So it'd be really cool to see them try some more, coffee IPAs and Imperial coffee stouts, because they did a really. I don't know if we've actually had an Imperial coffee stout from them, but they always did a really nice job with these things actually. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for describing the flavour of this beer. Let's just round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah, mouthfeel wise for me, this beer, it's definitely not one of the thicker and creamier sour beers that I've come across. It's kind of toward the bottom end of mid-body, generally speaking. Quite wet, quite slick and quite oily. The IBU count is a bit hard to figure out on this one, because you have got the bitterness of the coffee, you've also got a bit of the hop in there as well. It must be about 30 or 40 IBUs, something like that. It's certainly not going to blow the head off you, but it really does have a dryness the further you go into the aftertaste. And you could also talk about you could really talk about how this beer has you could kind of conflate the dryness in this beer with a bit of bitterness, but the malt base, as you said, bit dry, bit smooth, has got a little degree of sweetness to it as well. It's quite a layered malt base for sure. The sourness of this beer isn't, it doesn't really have a big tartness to it, this one. It just has that little sour sourness to it, but everything else kind of comes before that, and you have got the wee bit of hoppy character too, and the juicy fruits. Just a really interesting beer, this one that really has tested my palate quite a little bit, but I have to say I have enjoyed that, to be honest with you. It's still quite a drinkable sour, which is crazy when you think it's 9%, because for me it is an Imperial sour at that point. But I think this has been a really interesting and quirky beer to sign off from 2022 with. So thumbs up to Overtone for doing something a wee bit different, but I do need to make sure I try a few of the kind of lighter sour beers that they do. The Sour Plume is one that I'll need to wait for them to rebrew actually, because that I think would be very interesting. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. It's always great to hear the comments and stuff from you guys, so yeah, please keep them coming. But until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Overtone Brewing Company as well. We will return to them. But yeah, a very happy and prosperous 2023 to all of you. This review's been a wee bit longer because this beer has tasted my palate. But yeah, from tomorrow you will be seeing some more reviews, and we will keep going with these. I've got some really interesting beers sitting there waiting to be reviewed across 2023, and like I say, I'll be telling you about things that will be happening on the channel over the next wee while. But until the next time, slàinte, Scott, cheers. This was The Theory of Everything, a 9% Imperial pastry sour with peaches, bananas, raspberries, blackberries, coffee, maple syrup, vanilla and vegan marshmallows from Overtone Brewing Company in Glasgow. Happy Hogmanay, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slàinte, Scott, cheers, and Happy New Year.